number 2, Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister when she'll next meet the Secretary of State for Scotland.
First Minister.
No current plans.
Ruth Davidson.
Presiding Officer, we've just seen the First Minister gloating over the numbers going up in the polls, and what concerns me more is a serious question, as she identified, and that's the serious question of the numbers showing literacy standards going down in our schools. On the campaign trail, each party is rightly talking about opportunities for our young people, and the best way to increase opportunity is through a good education. And yet we find yesterday that literacy skills in our schools are getting worse, not better. At P4, at P7, at S2, standards in reading and writing have fallen over the last 2 years, and the people being failed most are the children from the poorest backgrounds. This has happened entirely on the Scottish Government's watch, and it is a scandal. Now, I know that the Scottish Government yesterday hastily put together a press release filled with action plans and improvement frameworks for this. But does the First Minister really think this is adequate to tackle what is becoming a crisis in school standards?
First Minister.
Well, can I firstly genuinely thank Ruth Davidson for asking a serious question, because I think this is a very serious matter. I said in response to Kezia Dugdale just a few moments ago that there's much to celebrate in Scottish education, and I will always make sure we take the opportunity to do that. But the results that were published yesterday, and let me make this absolutely and totally blunt, they are not good enough. And I, as First Minister, am determined that we improve them. We are determined that we improve standards in our schools overall, but also that we close the gap in attainment between young people living in our least deprived areas and those living in our most deprived areas. That is one of the, I think, most sacred responsibilities of any government, and as First Minister, it's one that I am personally passionate about. I think Ruth Davidson was slightly unfair when she described the announcement yesterday by the Education Secretary as hastily drawn up, because she will recall that several weeks ago now, in fact a couple of months ago now, I announced the establishment of the Scottish Attainment Challenge, backed by extra funding of £100 million. We are determined, and I am personally determined. I know personally, as many of us do, the value of a good education. And I am determined that my government meets the responsibility we have to ensure that every single young person in our schools gets the best education.
Ruth Davidson.
Presiding Officer, I hear what the First Minister is saying, but the problem is that I've heard it all before. Because this time last year, the Scottish Survey's numeracy figures were published, and they too showed that numeracy standards were going down. And guess what? The Scottish Government's response was, just like yesterday, to stick out a press release, to promise a new action plan and to hope that the story goes away. They are sticking plaster solutions designed to get through a news cycle, and all the while our classroom standards are declining. Now, yesterday, the First Minister, in her press release, pledged to study the best international practice. Well, I can tell her what that international practice shows. It shows that if parents and teachers are given more control over their schools, then standards will rise, casting off the one-size-fits-all, town hall knows best approach and allowing true diversity in the way we teach our children. I don't doubt the First Minister's intentions, but does she have the resolve to ditch the dogma and the government by press release and undertake genuine reforms that are needed?
First Minister.
Well, can I say a number of things to Ruth Davidson? Firstly, the government introduced these surveys so that we know what's happening in our schools and we have the information we need then to improve what is happening in our schools. And as she knows, we have established the Scottish Attainment Challenge. We've also established the Read, Write, Count campaign. We've also established the Raising Attainment for All programme, which now covers 23 local authorities and 180 schools across our country. So while I agree with the premise of Ruth Davidson's question, I think she is being unfair to say that this government has not been taking action to address this. I am, and I say this with no defensiveness, because the education of our young people is the most important responsibility of a government. I am determined to make sure we have the best standards in our schools for all of our children. If there are improvements that require to be made, we will seek to make them. And as we seek to make those improvements, let me be very, very clear, Presiding Officer, no dogma, no ideology, no political considerations will get in the way of us doing what needs to be done on behalf of the children of this country.